from the point of view of science and innovation is crucial to the matters that you're discussing, but also from a perspective of economic development, because the world, as we know, is a pretty treacherous place economically at the moment, and a huge range of things are important in terms of ensuring that New Zealand stays strong and gets ahead in the economic space. And the internet, the broadband, and the way that it's run is crucial from that perspective for New Zealand's future. I actually think it's interesting talking about the left and the right, because I think one thing that the left and the right generally agree on is that you can certainly get mostly sign up for this, which is New Zealand needs more and higher paying jobs. I always find when I make that statement it's hard to find somebody who disagrees with that. New Zealand needs more and higher paying jobs. And that's because it gives people income to support their families. It allows them to pay taxes to pay for public services, which are very important. And of course, it keeps more people exploring their opportunities in this country rather than somewhere else. So that's pretty fundamental. Often what happens next, though, is that then the disagreements start as to how to ensure that that takes place. And the reality is I'm a reasonably straightforward sort of person, and my view of it is that ultimately more and higher paying jobs depend on primarily businesses that are competitive. If you don't have a competitive business, then actually you aren't able to hire more people or pay them more. And what's a competitive business? Competitive business is something that sells something that people value, something that's innovative or has an innovative process that perhaps reduces the cost, or alternatively just something that's completely new and different. And that's how you have a successful business. And you can have what we know as ticket clipping businesses, but ultimately ticket clipping businesses get competed away, because if it's that easy, a whole bunch of other people turn up and start doing the same thing. So ultimately you need something unique, whether that's a process, a design, a product, and that's what innovation is actually all about. And when you look at history, innovation has driven most of what we have in the world today. There's an amazing amount of innovation that's occurred right through time. So how do you ensure that those businesses have the opportunity to thrive? Well, again, it's not that hard. There's only about 6 things that businesses actually depend on in order to be successful. One of them is innovation. Like I said, if you don't have innovation, it's pretty hard to have a successful niche in a successful business. Another one's money. It's hard to go far without money if you're running a business. So capital is crucially important. Access to necessary raw materials, and that can vary in different types of businesses, but nevertheless it's important. A skilled workforce is crucial. And then of course you must have the customers that want to buy your product or service. And in the New Zealand context, that very quickly means going overseas. Because with a country of 4.3 million people, you get to the end pretty quickly and you're sort of out of nappies hardly, and you're out there suddenly competing in that big world. And finally, of course, you need the public infrastructure that businesses depend on. Hard to run a successful business without electric light. Hard also these days to run it without the internet and broadband. And of course, your transport. All those things are crucially important. So if you draw a line through that, it actually becomes pretty straightforward. If we want more and better jobs for New Zealanders, we frankly need to encourage more successful businesses to base themselves here, and that fundamentally means making more of those ingredients available to businesses more easily. So it's as simple and as complex as that, and that's the challenge. So this morning we're in an area which deals with at least 3 of those areas. Infrastructure, obviously. Innovation, obviously. I'll add skills, it's very important, but also export markets, because one of the topics you're discussing actually is all about access to export markets. So there's a lot happening, and NetHui is dealing with some of the crunchy issues that are out there in terms of making those things more accessible for New Zealand companies and New Zealanders. Fundamentally, fast broadband is critical for economic growth, but also for society. It's becoming more and more important. And the exciting thing is that the number of companies around the place that are doing things with the technology and making things happen is actually getting more exciting by the day. One of the thrills of my current role is I get to go and see a whole bunch of companies that otherwise I would never get to go and see. It's an absolute privilege, and you go and see them and what they're doing and the fizz and the excitement, and it really is quite inspiring. So just to give you one or two examples, at one end of the spectrum, Park Road Post in Miramar, Wellington. It's a massive outfit which is basically enabled through the digital economy. It wouldn't be able to be there if it wasn't for the way that the internet and broadband works today. And it's a magnificent facility that Peter Jackson and the team have there, and it really is building an industry that can operate from Miramar, Wellington, which means it can operate from anywhere in the world, but they're doing it here and doing it very well. Organisations like Tate Communications in Christchurch, which have been around for a long time, but they're out there not just selling walkie-talkies these days, but they're actually out there selling managed services. So they run half of this stuff for around the world from Christchurch, and they do it very effectively, again, through communications technology. There's an outfit in Hamilton which has been around for a very long time. It's called the Livestock Improvement Corporation. Some of you will probably not know a huge amount about it. I know I didn't until I went there and saw the team in action. They are using data from farms collected using the Rural Broadband Initiative, which they are huge fans of, and other internet, to actually create real-time decisions for farmers as how to improve their productivity. And so it goes. At the other end of the spectrum, you have the more new and speculative entities like Yike Bike in Christchurch doing a fantastic job. And the one that I went and saw recently, which I'll never forget because it reminded me of us when we were starting out in the radio business, a place called Book Track on the North Shore, which has just won a high-tech award. Went up there, there's about 5 people in a room, a barely furnished office, and I mean B-A-R-E-L-Y, barely furnished office, and basically just working from deal to basically turn an innovation into something that can be very successful. So all of these things are very exciting, and what excites me is there is now a huge range of people who actually don't know the boundaries that the generation ahead of them knew and are actually prepared to innovate irrespective of where they sit in the world, and actually I think the digital technologies have really helped with that. So that's the story of how they're innovating, but of course the way in which they innovate depends on a whole range of things, some of it which includes government policy. And the two things that obviously are the biggest in that are the UFB and the RBI, and they are going to be massively transformative for this country. This year we have completed in the UFB the first 70,000 premises passed. That's just finished at around the June-July period. So that's on target. By this time next year it'll be 235,000 premises passed, and the pace is picking up all the time. And in the most advanced area, i.e. in terms of build, which is in Whangarei, North Power, with the first deal done, they are currently getting about a 10% sign-up at this stage, without even the big ISPs really driving into it yet. So that's very promising and very exciting. We also have the RBI underway because, as you know, for a long time, rural areas were actually dealing, 60% of the households were still dealing with dial-up. Which is hard to believe in this day and age. Now over 56,000 rural households after the first year can receive new or improved access to broadband. Also 400 schools signed directly up to fibre in rural areas as well. So it is a big build. It's just moving along quietly, but it's one of those things that's going to actually really catch a lot of people out, I think, in the next couple of years in terms of what it is achieving. Suddenly it is going to be having a massive impact on a number of areas, and again you're discussing some of those areas right now at this conference, and areas such as e-health, where there is significant changes already going on. I saw a press release the other day about the Waikato DHB and what they're doing in terms of telehealth, but they're not the only ones down the west coast doing the same thing. And the opportunities for remote diagnostics, the opportunities for remote monitoring of patients, particularly people with chronic illnesses without them having to travel, is actually very, very exciting, and it basically depends on high quality video and also vital signs measurement, and that's pretty exciting. Ministry of Education is about to embark on this network for learning. In fact, I think it's just about to start, and that's a managed network to lift the uptake of e-education initiatives in our schools. And that is, again, going to be not just transformative, but I think quite disruptive of the education system. In other words, it is going to be one of those disruptive technology which turns on its head the whole concept of teaching and learning. It's already happening, and perhaps some of the challenges is the impact that it's having on the dynamics and relationships between educators and students. But that's going to continue, and actually I think for those that embrace it, it's going to be something that would be wonderful to be part of as educators, but it is going to be rolling out again very fast, and I'm sure we'll be having discussions in 2 or 3 years about the impact that it's having on the education sector. E-business is another area, and I think it's easy to understate the impact on business of having fibre to the premise. I was at a place the other day where they've just got it. It's very interesting. There's all these companies around the place doing great and innovative things. This particular outfit has some designers in New Zealand and some designers in Bangladesh. And until the UFB came past the door, the broadband coverage in Bangladesh was better than it was at the premises locally here in New Zealand. They've flipped that around. It's now the other way, but enables them to do their business model much more effectively. And so it goes. In the innovation space, we're going to make an announcement later today in regards to the Advanced Technology Institute, and there will be a digital component to that, which I think will be pretty important in terms of exploring our opportunities there. E-government's obviously crucial, and we've set up 2 better public services results there to reduce the cost of businesses and to get about 70% of transactions online over the next 5 years. And in some areas that's going very well now, but in other areas there's still a lot to do. And again, that's going to be very disruptive. Most people still go down and licence their car at the local AA or do their driver's licence at the local AA at this point. Well, within 3 or 4 years, most of that will be done online. So that's going to be very, very significant change. And e-development, of course, as well. Going into areas that have been challenged, perhaps with a lack of computer literacy, with projects like Computers in Homes, I think is crucial to make sure that everybody is part of that digital revolution. So there's a range of areas that we're focusing on. The other one, 2 or 3 others I'd just like to touch on very briefly. One is the area of ICT skills. There is a worldwide shortage of ICT skills currently, and it's not getting any better, and New Zealand is part of that. So one of the challenges for all of us, particularly those of you that are evangelists for the digital revolution, is actually to get schools, people, students, families to get more focused on ICT careers, because there's a danger that the focus of the skills that will be required lags the opportunity. And I think it's very important that we all work to address that. Cyber security is crucial. I know Amy has made that a big focus. We had our first Cyber Security Awareness Week in June of this year. We have the National Cyber Security Centre underway. And that's pretty important, because actually that's a defensive offence, if you like, offensive defence or whatever. But basically it's about making sure that we keep the infrastructure going as people get more and more dependent on it. Intellectual property is also crucially important. And the challenge for us all is striking the right balance there between content creators and distributors and consumers. And it isn't an easy balance. And anybody that says it should just be one way or the other, I think, is wrong. We actually have to work our way through and find a balance that will be successful and one that we can all endorse. We've made some steps, obviously, in this country. There's a review coming up next year of how the Copyright Act is going. And then behind all that, there's something called the TPP, which you may have heard of, which is designed to be a quality trade agreement for this country to participate in amongst some of the larger economies in the world. And so there's many upsides of it, but the challenge is, as always, that when you do agreements like this, they become a compromise of various countries' priorities. And the challenge is always, where do you draw those compromises? And I think my understanding of it, and I'm not that close to it, but my understanding of it is that the New Zealand negotiators are crucially aware of the challenges of making sure that we don't compromise too much, and frankly so are a lot of the other countries. So that's ongoing. Can I congratulate those of you that are involved in that process, that are talking to MBIE officials and MFAT officials to make your views known? I think that's very important. I know also some of you are travelling to the negotiating rounds, and I think that's important as well, and the negotiations will continue to progress. But again, it's actually the involvement in people, the making sure that everybody understands the trade-offs and the opportunities and the risks that will get the best result for this country, but more importantly, get the best result across the TPP process. So there is a lot happening. And in fact, if you actually sit down and look at it, there's actually a massive range of things to address, which is no doubt why many of you are here. You have the TPP, you have copyright, you have the UFB, you have RBI, you have e-education, e-health, e-business, the 4G spectrum due to come out later this, due to actually come up for allocation later this year. Lots of discussion going on about that, and of course the offensive, defence, cyber security as well. And there'll be other parts that I haven't had time to mention this morning. So I think it's an exciting time to be involved. It's an industry that I'm very passionate about because it is one that's so important to this country, but also it brings connectivity, not just for economic reasons, but for social reasons, and it drives communities together. So thank you very, very much for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Have a fantastic second day, and happy to take any questions. Cheers. Yeah. Great.
And I just thought I'd ask you, could you give me the winning tip?
It depends on what you're actually going to tell them. And I'll
do it now.
Absolutely.
Tablets are cheap, getting down to $100, right?
Yep.
And don't do it through large centralised distribution. There are 50,000 teachers. You can't tell them to all get herded like sheep.
I tend to agree with you on that. Yep. So no, just go and underline that stuff. Very good. Oh.
So,
Yep.
next year, big or tweaking at the edges?
It depends. You go into a review to listen to what people are going to say. So, but my sense is probably more a fine tuning than a massive review. But I think we're prepared to say, let's see where it takes us. But again, I think the challenge is to strike that balance, and there is a balance between content creation, content distribution, and the consumer, and making sure that there is appropriate, and I stress appropriate, rewards for content creators in a way that reflects the reality of technology today. So I think it's going to be an interesting review. I doubt that it's going to go away as an issue for the next few years. I just sense that it's just one of those ones that's going to keep being debated.
Kia ora, Stephen. Just one question here. I'm sorry, I asked this last time I saw you as well. What's happening with the Patents Act?
Where are you? Oh, down the back, sorry. What was that?
Patents Act.
The Patents Bill? Yep. It should be back in the House shortly. We are pretty focused on getting it done. Just for those of you that don't know, around the patents legislation, it's 20 or 30 years old now. It's significantly out of date. One of our challenges as an innovative country is our low rate of patenting, and I think one of the challenges with that is just that we've got a very outdated process. Looking to get it through the House later this year, he said guardedly, because there's so much legislation to try and get through. But certainly part of the process of setting up a joint patent recognition system with Australia, and we're keen to get on with that because that'll help our companies do it once for Australasia, and I think that's important.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we don't have time for any more questions. I apologise, we simply don't have time at this juncture, but thank you to the Minister.
Thanks very much. Cheers.